process. Others might have a lot of knowledge. Not everyone has the same information yet. So if you're someone that knows a lot already and wants to have a more dedicated discussion about RENA, you can join us for our April 22nd meeting. And for everyone else, you'll learn what this abbreviation means shortly. So no worries. And please join us as well as if you'd like to learn more. And Linda, can you share the link to that event so people can access it in the chat? So with that being said, particularly in this online environment, it's important for us to go over some ground rules. With one of the goals of this meeting being for us to hear from you, please only share your questions for us or responses to our questions in the chat, and avoid debating with one another. Again, this is an introductory meeting, the beginning of a process meant to inform and to gather your initial thoughts. No decisions are being made, and there's going to be a lot of discussions in the year to come as this process continues. We also understand there's a lot of different interests converging in this meeting, so we really encourage everyone to be respectful to everyone else here and to make space for people to learn and to listen. And if you're someone that stands back when questions are asked, we encourage you to step forward. Vice versa, if you're someone that is very comfortable stepping forward, we encourage you to step back a bit so others can contribute as well. There's no right or wrong answers. We just really want to hear your thoughts. And related to all this, we're going to do our best to encourage everyone to participate and create a space where we all have an equal chance to speak and be respected. Sorry about that. So now with that being said, Let's Talk Housing is ultimately all about hearing from you. And it's an outreach effort of all the jurisdictions in San Mateo County. That's all the cities, the towns, and the county, to increase awareness of and participation in the housing element update process. Since 2008, all these jurisdictions have met regularly to collaborate on housing policy and share what's working, respond to new laws or issues, explore potential policies and programs, and this effort is called 21 Elements. It's not a nonprofit or organization, it's just a group of staff from all of San Mateo County's jurisdictions that have found they can do more together than apart when it comes to planning housing policy. And although they've collaborated on housing policy for more than 12 years, including past housing elements, we've never tried this type of countywide outreach about city-specific processes before. So it's kind of an experiment, and if it's helpful, we'll continue. And if it's not, we'll regroup and change course. We thought it could be one more way to expand who we hear from, because it's more important than ever for us to hear from as many people as possible, not only to state housing laws, but to all the jurisdictions. Everyone really wants to ensure that our plans match the housing needs of all of our community members. So the effort includes a website, email and text updates. There's going to be this introductory series of countywide meetings, followed by video online, surveys. There'll be additional meetings and events in other languages to follow that we'll be working on through the formation of an equity advisory group made up of a lot of community organizations to ensure that we hear from as many people in the community as possible and meet them where they're at. So here's the website. Linda will be sharing the link to it in the chat. We really encourage you to visit it to learn more about housing, upcoming events. There'll be San Mateo information that'll be updated and added to the website in the months to come, and it'll just be a really great resource to connect you. So who am I talking? Well, my name is Brandy Campbell-Wood, and I'm from Baird & Driscoll Community Planning. And Baird & Driscoll has facilitated the 21 Elements meetings and helped San Mateo and all the other jurisdictions with housing issues since 2008. We're basically technical consultants that function as an extension of staff to help them get things done. And again, Let's Talk Housing is the countywide outreach effort that grew out of all the jurisdictions working together on the housing element update, which is why I'm here. I'm joined today by my colleague, David Driscoll, to help present this meeting. And we're also joined by your city staff, and they'll be introducing themselves a little bit later. So now that we have an idea of who is in the room on our end, we'd love to learn who is here with us today. So please take a minute to fill out the poll that my colleague David or one of the other co-hosts will be launching shortly. There are 5 questions, so just keep scrolling down until you've answered the 5th, and we'll give you a minute to complete this. And I just want to reiterate that it's really important we reach as many people in our community as possible, which is why we're asking a bit about who you are, so we can better understand who we're hearing from, but more importantly, who we might be missing.
Okay, the votes are coming in.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Give it a couple more minutes. We're about halfway in terms of response. Okay. Just a few more seconds, and I'm going to close the poll. Okay, looks good. We got 48 of 56, and I think there's about 8 of us supporting. So I'm going to close the poll.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. So now we are going to get into what a housing element is, the update process, and some countywide trends. So what exactly is a housing element? It's basically a local housing plan for the homes needed in every community. While local governments do not build housing, they do create the rules that shape where housing is built, what types, and how much. So the housing element or plan is essentially that. It includes policies and programs that address housing needs for all types of households, including those with special housing needs or at different income levels. And solutions like how do we preserve affordable housing, particularly existing housing. So California state law requires that every city, town, and county update their housing element about every 8 years. And the last completed cycle was for 2015 to 2022. And this update that we're starting right now will guide the housing in your community from 2023 to 2031. Now, there are a lot of parts to a housing element, and it includes several studies and analyses like the housing that is here now, any constraints or issues that will make housing in certain areas hard to develop, identifying sites where it might be possible to add new housing, reviewing goals, policies, programs, figuring out new ones. There will also be new considerations for fair housing laws to address discrimination and segregation in housing, and environmental justice to reduce health risks and address the needs of disadvantaged communities. Also, the state requires that housing elements engage community members in discussing housing needs so that the final plan reflects and responds to your concerns and priorities. So how it all works, it starts with the general plan. Now, every city, town, and county has one, and it guides all the ways they're planned, managed, and grow, from our roads and sidewalks to our parks and our neighborhoods. And one very important chapter of that general plan is the housing element. And that includes the plan for all the homes needed in the community. This includes homes for all the people that work here and might not be able to live here right now. And it's basically the housing we need minus the housing we have equals the housing that we plan for. One part of the housing element is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, that abbreviation from earlier. It's a target number required by state law that provides a guide for how much housing to plan for. The California Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD, calculates a total number for the Bay Area based on a lot of factors like jobs, economic growth, population, unmet housing needs due to existing shortages. And the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG, they then decide on the share for each city, town, and county after a lengthy process. And they took into account the size of each jurisdiction, the number of jobs, regional growth projections, and other factors. It's not the most important part, but it is something that is on a lot of people's minds. So it's really important just to understand what it is. How this all comes together in the process. So based on your input over the next year, again, this is an introductory meeting. We've got a lot of talking to do. There's going to be a bunch of your input. There's going to be a lot of studies and analyses. And then from all of that, policies and programs are going to be developed to respond to the housing needs. And this will all go into developing a draft housing element. After more public input, there'll be hearings, a review by the state, council meetings, and commission meetings. It'll become a final draft. And that final draft will be adopted by San Mateo, then certified by the state as being in compliance with state housing laws. It's then part of our general plan, and it'll inform the housing policy and programs in your city or town over the next 8 years. And its goal is ultimately to support the creation and preservation of the housing that your community needs. The process typically looks like this, but it'll vary based on the schedule here. So throughout the rest of this year, there will be a lot of community outreach. Simultaneously, the city will be assessing what happened since the last update, developing the draft, informed by all those studies we talked about and your input and state law requirements. A draft will be released during the spring of 2022 for public review, and followed by that, the public hearings will happen with your planning commission and council, and in the fall of 2022, there'll be an initial review by the state. And after all those edits have been made, a final draft will be adopted by council and submitted to HCD for final certification in January 2023. So I know that might be a lot to digest. So we're going to spend a few minutes answering your questions about the overall housing element update process and timeline. Please put your questions in the chat. For any questions we don't get to, we're going to respond to and share them with all attendees after the event. And remember, any questions that are specific to anything beyond the housing element update, we're going to have a discussion about that later. But right now, if anything I just said was confusing, we would really like to clear it up for you.
Great. There was a couple of questions just in the chat. One was about getting the survey results. We'll include those in the meeting summary that will be sent out to everyone who registered. You'll get a link to the summary, and those results will be there. There's also a question about why we asked about race. That's something that the state pays attention to. So they want to make sure that we're doing outreach to and having an inclusive process, doing the housing element update. And we'll talk a little bit about, well, Brandy talked a little bit about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So ensuring that we're having an equitable process to hear from all voices.
And regarding putting questions, if you could put the question to everyone in the chat. I'm presenting, I'm having a bit of hard time seeing all the chat. So you could also, if you want to direct message them, you could send them to David. We are going to talk about the San Mateo RHNA number when the city presents. That's a question in here. So on our April 22nd meeting, we're going to talk all about RHNA, and we really encourage you to register for that. This meeting is just to get a high level overview, introduction, and then to speak with you all. But that April 22nd meeting, all about RHNA. So please do come to that.
So Brandy, I'm getting some direct messages to me, and I think maybe you're getting others to you. Mm-hmm. So why don't, do you see any others to you, and read those off, and then I'll go through mine?
No, I have a lot of Rita questions. So that's why I was redirecting people to the April 22nd meeting. And then the city staff will talk specific about San Mateo shortly.
So there's a question, did you say it considers the housing for all people who work in San Mateo? So the housing element considers a full range of housing needs. The RENA number factors in jobs in terms of unmet housing needs. So it's addressed there. The housing needs in terms of special housing needs is more focused on people with disabilities, seniors, large families, lower income, but it is factored into the housing element in terms of the RENA projections. And there's some other RENA questions which we'll respond to. So there's a question, do we believe the RENA numbers are accurate? It's not based on our belief. The RENA, we will have the talk through on the 22nd about what the methodology was that the ABAG committee came up with that are behind the numbers. And just to underscore again, that the numbers that we have currently are illustrative based on the draft methodology, which is being reviewed by the state. So they're not final, they're not even draft yet, let alone final. And we will put all the incoming questions into the report and have written responses. I have a question here. Can HCD issue a pre-ruling on housing element compliance with regard to measure P in place before getting too far down the housing element process? I'm not sure I entirely understand that question. There's a point in the process prior to adoption where we send the draft element to HCD for a review, and they give us feedback on any issues they think that are going to be problematic for certification, so that we have an opportunity to respond to those. And that will happen towards the third quarter of next year.
I don't have any other questions.
I have a question here. I heard that San Mateo voted to exclude certain areas of the city from the general plan update process. In general, the areas excluded are high opportunity areas. Does this conflict with the mandate to affirmably further fair housing? The member of the city team speak to the exclusion of areas from the general plan update process?
I can speak to that. My name is Christina Horsberger. I'm the Community Development Department Director. We want to hear from everyone in the general plan process. There are no excluded neighborhoods. There are no excluded groups. We are starting to recommence our outreach for the general plan, and we're making every effort to reach all of the communities and to hear from everybody. So we did define study areas. So there are certain areas of the city where we're going to focus our early efforts, but everyone is somebody we want to hear from, and people from all neighborhoods and all parts of the city.
There's a question about whether homeless people are factored in. Housing needs, providing housing for homeless are considered and addressed in the housing element. How is feedback weighted through the process? Demographically participants to reflect the diversity of our city and region. There's not a formal weighting, but we do look at sort of who we're having in terms of participants and making sure that we're doing outreach to folks that we're not hearing from. There's a question, can you say more about the part of the process where it goes from the general plan to building? How does it get determined what will actually be built to make sure builders include affordable housing in new construction? So yeah, to underscore, the city doesn't build housing. So the city sets the rules in terms of land use and regulations that guide housing. And the city also creates requirements and incentives to encourage or require the development of affordable housing. But all of those are contingent upon developers and nonprofit developers included coming forward to make proposals. The city itself sometimes we'll try to proactively encourage development, but it's mostly the market that builds housing, and the city sets the rules by which it must build the housing.
Someone
Question.
asked if it, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Someone
No,
asked
go
if is infrastructure and public transport factored into the planning?
Yes, sorry, I'm supposed to respond. Yeah, the housing element is required under state law to speak to what are called governmental and non-governmental constraints. So infrastructure is an example of it's a quasi-governmental constraint in some situations, and other times it's other agencies that build infrastructure. So it looks at those constraints and identifies what things might get in the way of developing housing to meet the projected need. And then speaks to things that the city or its partners are working on to address the constraint. It doesn't in itself address the constraint, but it puts in place the programs to consider it and address it. There's a question, when can we expect the report to be published? And there's two maybe reports that might be referring to. One is the meeting summary report. We're planning to do one report that covers the meeting we had earlier this week, this meeting, and we're planning to do a follow-up meeting because we had some technical issues earlier this week that kept a lot of people from participating. So we'll be scheduling a third meeting and then doing a report that captures the input from all three of those meetings. And that will be in maybe 3 weeks after the final meeting, which has yet to be scheduled. And then there's the report in terms of the plan, which would be the draft would be published in the middle of next year, the draft housing element. So question, why did the housing quota, the RHNA, double? How is this determined? Can the numbers be challenged? We'll talk about the RHNA on April 22nd, but the short answer is the state does the projection that comes to the region. The state's number to the region doubled, and that is primarily because they changed their methodology about how they do projections, and they factored in unmet existing housing needs this time, which they have not done in previous RHNA rounds. So that includes factoring in overcrowded housing, people overpaying for housing. So that's the main reason, in addition to projected job and population growth.
I have another RHNA question about if cities can appeal the state mandated RHNA process.
So once the draft, so right now we don't have draft RHNA numbers. The draft RHNA numbers will come out probably this summer following the approval of the methodology by the state. At that point, there is an appeals process. It's mostly focused on issues of data and methodology, but there is an opportunity for jurisdictions in the region to appeal the RHNA numbers at that time. Okay, sorry, there's a lot of questions. Where are we at on timing? How many more can we do?
I'd say let's do, we want to have at least an hour actually, we should just do like one more question because I have a few more slides and then we want to get into discussion.
Okay. How does road traffic needs get factored into the process? It seems like there's an element for housing, one for downtown, but not an infrastructure element and or roads element. Can you address that? So the great opportunity you have in city of San Mateo is you're doing your general plan update at the same time that you're doing the housing element update. So you're looking comprehensively. And someone from the city, can you speak to in terms of I'm assuming you're updating your transportation element?
Yeah, so as part of our general plan, we have several elements. There's not one that's just entitled infrastructure, I don't believe, but infrastructure is accounted for throughout the various elements, and roads would be covered under the circulation and land use. And so we are looking at that very closely.
Great. Okay, see.
All right.
Yeah, okay. So we will capture, I got 23 messages I haven't scrolled down to make sure we capture all of the incoming questions and respond to them in the report. Thanks.
And I'll also say your RHNA specific questions will carry over to our April 22nd meeting too. We'll be able to respond to those there.
In fact, the RHNA questions will be helpful for us to prepare for that meeting.
Exactly. So we appreciate
proactively
it.
Respond.
Okay. So now that we've talked a bit about what a housing element update is, let's share some overall trends for the entire county. The Bay Area is a great place to live. We all know this, but throughout the region and our county, there just hasn't been enough housing for all income levels, which has made the costs go up over the years. This has a lot to do with there being a lot of new jobs. We have a really strong economy, and that's great, and have for decades. While some communities have a lot more jobs than others, we haven't built enough housing the past 30 years to keep the balance with the amount of jobs we keep adding. So to show you an example, since 2010, the county's added over 100,000 jobs, but only 10,000 homes. Additionally, our population is growing naturally. We have more folks living longer, which is also great. And then their children grow up and move out into homes of their own. And all this means together that more housing is needed to keep things in balance. And it's easier to meet the need for market rate housing because developers will build it and those who can afford it will pay for it. It gets a little more complicated when trying to make enough low to moderate income housing, because that often requires subsidies to make them pencil out. And ultimately, not having enough housing across all the income levels has meant the rents and prices have just keep going up. It's kind of expensive to live in the region. We all know this, the country knows this. While there are a lot of good jobs, some are making a lot more than others. Wages for many haven't kept up with how costly it is for housing in our great economy. And a lot of people are spending 30% of their income on rent, which is considered cost burdened. In fact, 1 in 4 renters spend more than 50% of their income on rent. And while rents have declined during the past year of the COVID pandemic, renters already paying a lot toward rent, who are cost burdened already, haven't seen that much relief. So also we rely on our essential service workers. And the reality is every 6 low wage jobs in San Mateo County, there's only one affordable home that worker can afford. So what does this actually all mean? The median income, meaning the middle spot between the lowest and highest wages in San Mateo County, is $121,000 for a single person. So if you're a grocery store clerk or barista making minimum wage, which is $15 an hour, you'll make around $29,000 a year based on a 40-hour week. And this is considered extremely low income because it's less than 30% of that 100% wage. Now, if you're a school administrator or social worker, even you with an hourly wage of $45 an hour and an $86,000 salary a year are defined as low income in San Mateo County because you're making less than 80% of that 100% wage. And even this person would be paying almost 30% of their income on rent, which would be considered cost burdened. So what are some impacts? Overall, a lot of people are paying too much of their income on housing, and this has resulted in overcrowding or people living with more roommates or family members than the home can hold. This can also mean people stay in unsafe or unhealthy living conditions because they don't have options. People are also moving further away to places for more affordable rents and home prices, and this creates longer commutes for them to work. And then with more workers we depend on moving away due to high costs, we have more traffic. Sometimes people can no longer make all of these indirect and direct costs pencil out, traveling far from work, so they leave our communities. And then that can have a lot of ripple effects as well. San Mateo County has always been a great place to live and raise a family, which is why many move here, have over the years, continue to. And now so many are growing old here. And we have a lot of people who are 55 and over, way more than there were 10 or 20 years ago. So we need to simultaneously think of how do we continue to support our seniors so they can stay in their homes and communities as they get older, and make sure young people and families not only can find housing here, but want to move here because it's the housing they want. So ultimately, the Housing Element Update provides an opportunity to develop policies and programs that can respond to all the phases of life our community members experience. So with all that being said, I'm now going to turn it over to your amazing City of San Mateo staff to provide an overview of San Mateo's trends, the Housing Element Update process and timeline here. So I'm going to stop my share and then Nikki's going to share for you all.
Everyone see that?
Yep.
Cool.
Okay, excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to kick things off. I'm Sandy Council. I'm the housing manager. We have our housing element team on the line. Julia Klein, our acting planning manager. is here. You already heard from Christina Horsberger, our Community Development Director. We also have Diana Elrod, who is our consultant helping us draft the housing element and work with our community outreach efforts. And from our staff, we also have Nikki Vu and Linda Lee. So we are here to walk you through some of what we're working on. So I'm going to start to share a short overview of demographic factors that are informative in evaluating our housing needs and trends. So the first one is just population growth. Over the last 40 years, you can see that our population has steadily increased. We're a little over 100,000 now. It's increased about 26%. The age of our residents is pretty diverse. As Brandy mentioned earlier, we hear a lot about the aging baby boomers. We know that's a big demographic in our community, but also note that right now, the largest age group in San Mateo is that 20 to 34-year-old, which is the age where many young adults tend to leave their family homes and live independently and start new households. So that has impacts on housing. Next, Brandy was also talking about the countywide income information for San Mateo. Our median's just a little bit higher. It is important to note that about a fifth of our community makes less than 50,000 and 35% makes less than 100,000. And then that it becomes important when we look at the rents and cost to purchase a home. So if you go to the next slide, if we use the standard definition of affordable as being 1/3 of your income, which Brandy had mentioned before, we can see where this starts to become problematic for those with the lower wage jobs. These are a smattering of the median asking rents that we just picked up off the internet last week. The median is the middle, so we have a range of housing options in San Mateo. We have a diverse housing stock. You can certainly find a 1-bedroom for less than $2,100, and you can certainly find one for more when it comes to being able to afford. And this is not reflective of what people are paying who are living in their residences for some time. But if you were out looking for housing right now, this is what you're faced with the market. Even though these rents are a little lower than they were pre-pandemic, you still need an income of $79,000 to be able to afford a 1-bedroom and $100,000 to afford a 2-bedroom. In order to buy a house with a 20% down payment, the mortgage payment would require an income of over $200,000 for a $1.4 million home. So we know that about 1/3 of the households in our community would struggle trying to be able to afford these median rents. A little bit about the makeup of San Mateo County. We are roughly half and half owners and renters, a little 54% owners. We also, when we look at the split between people who live in single family homes versus multifamily homes, it's a similar split. It's almost half and half. So that just shows that we have a range of housing situations that our community enjoys with the variety of owners and renters and the types of housing they live in. This graphic shows where people live versus where they work. In San Mateo, about the same amount of people live in San Mateo and work elsewhere as those who live elsewhere come in to work in San Mateo. So that does help explain a lot of the traffic that we all see. It's only out of all this mix of people who are coming and going out of San Mateo during a normal work day, only 7% actually live and work in the city limits. So we know that has impacts on housing needs. On our housing element, one of the main purposes of it is to provide programs and policies to support housing. San Mateo has a pretty good base to work on from our existing policies. We have an inclusionary, which we call our below market rate housing policy. It requires market rate developers to include affordable housing units in their projects. City recently updated this program last year, and at this point in time, developers are required to provide 15% of their market rate projects, anything 11 or more units, provides those units for the program. The program consists of both rental and ownership units. There are a variety of income targets in this program. So these units do assist people at different income ranges. We have a first-time buyer program, which includes both the ownership units that come out of the BMR program, as well as a handful of projects that the city developed years ago with in partnership with a nonprofit developer that were condominiums specifically targeted to first-time home buyers. And so we manage wait lists for both of these programs for people who are interested in that. The commercial linkage fee is something that we worked on countywide through 21 elements and a number of other jurisdictions back in 2016. And this is a housing fee that's charged on new commercial construction to be used to support housing. It's based on the premise that new office creates space that increases the number of workers, which creates pressure on available housing. We've collected about $7 million of that so far, and a little over half of it is committed to the city's affordable housing project that we're working on right now down on 4th and Railroad, the parking lot that's the city-owned parking lot at 4th and Railroad. ADUs, over the past few years, the city has amended its accessory dwelling unit ordinance to comply with recent state legislation that makes ADUs easier to get built. The city also instituted a flat fee for these units to help lessen the burden of getting building permits. As a result of that, we've seen an increase in ADU building permits issued. For example, in 2017 and 18, we issued 5 and 8 building permits respectively, and then 2019 and 20, we issued 45 and 52. So that shows that there is interest in this program in the community, and people are starting to do this on their own. Affordable housing projects, the city has a variety of funding sources to support affordable housing. We have a combination of state and federal grants. We have revenue from prior housing loan programs, the new commercial linkage fee. We use these funds. Also, the city has developed housing on its own land. As a matter of fact, we have 2 projects that are up and running that were on city-owned parcels, and we have another one in the works. We've used these funds to help build new construction. We've used it for acquisition and rehab of existing housing, used it for homeless shelters and programs. Oh, and I wanted to, I know somebody asked whether homelessness was part of the housing element, and I just wanted to, I know David didn't get to that. Yes, we do evaluate homeless needs and homeless programs in the housing element. And then we also have some home repair and rehabilitation programs for lower income homeowners to help preserve the existing housing stock. And then finally, we work with, the city does not do this alone. We work in partnership with a number of community organizations. Here's an example of organizations that help provide housing related services, such as legal assistance, homeless prevention, emergency rent assistance, etc. So specifically about San Mateo's arena, currently our housing element, we're in the 2015 to 2023 housing element. That was known as Arena 5, the 5th round. So we are currently in that planning period. Our target was 3,100. As we just released our 2020 report a few weeks ago, that's posted on our website. Our progress so far is that we've, and this is permits issued, this is building permits issued, 1,800 units. We have 3 years to go on this planning period. We feel comfortable that we will hit the target. Just last year, city approved almost 1,480 units. Those won't hit this RENA chart until the permits are issued. So we feel very comfortable we'll hit our total target. Out of those, we also approved 325 affordable units. And we do not believe we'll meet our total RENA affordable target in that 3-year period, mostly due to financial constraints to build this housing. I thought it was interesting to note, though, out of the 325 units that we approved last year, 225 of them were, city sponsored, city land, city money, but 100 of them were through the inclusionary program where the market rate developers are providing them. So both tools are very, very important as we try to meet our goals. So the RENA 6 allocation, like David said, this number is not firm yet, but based on all the options that were considered with the methodology committee, this number sort of bumped around, but it was always sort of in this range. We are expecting our allocation to be around this range, around 7,000 for the next cycle. And so we will see what that turns out to be. And we are working toward trying to analyze the existing sites in San Mateo for where housing can be built. Okay, next slide. Our goals is to, our overall goals of the housing amendment are basically to address the housing needs of all the community, to have a robust public engagement strategy, and especially this round, there are going to be specific efforts looking at fair housing in our community. As Brandy mentioned, the housing element is part of the general plan, and since we are doing a general plan update as well, these two processes are going to run parallel and overlap. As it was explained to you, the general plan, so the housing element, we're going to get our RENA number, whatever it is. We'll be looking, we're already started evaluating what capacity we have to accommodate that housing within our existing zoning in San Mateo. We're working on that list now, and we're trying, once we know whether it looks like we can fit those in our existing zoning, it will give us information to move forward. But in the meantime, the housing element will look at the housing needs, look at our RENA number, and then using the base of the programs that we already have in place, flesh that out further to address those housing needs. Now, where housing units are located and what the zoning is and what the density is part of the land use element, which is in the general plan. Also, people mentioned traffic. The circulation element is in the general plan process. And things like open space and safety and all those other things. So the housing element is a chapter of the general plan. So we'll be coordinating and working together, but also this housing element is a very specific document that has to go to the state and get approved, which the general plan does not. And so we do have a deadline where the housing element needs to be done probably before the general plan. So that's how we are going to overlap the two. And then I think, is that the end of our press? Yeah, so we can take some general questions on that. This was just meant to be an introduction and overview. We certainly are not going to have solutions at this point in time. That's all the stuff that we'll be working on in the next year. We will have more workshops through December, and then early next year we'll actually be getting ready to release a draft plan. We'll be working on it all along, of course, but so.
I've opened up the chat function again for Q&A. If there are questions, please be sure and write them down in the chat. If you've asked more than one question, we may not get to all of your questions. We're trying to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get their questions answered. There were a couple that came in while Sandy was talking, and I will share a few of those. One is, why are new developments in San Mateo, including that on 3rd and Delaware, adding more office space when housing is needed? Why aren't we keeping a jobs tier balance that is keeping blue collar workers and trade jobs available instead of constantly adding office space?
Well, I can take a
Please,
stab at that.
Sandy?
Yes. So, you know, with one thing I want to
build housing, why are they putting in these giant office buildings?
Please. Thank you.
Okay. So with the housing element, as well as just our zoning in general, the city doesn't tell people what to build and when to build it. We do have zoning that delegates where things should be built within our community, where office should be versus where housing should be, et cetera. And so usually it's the market that dictates why people are building commercial or why people are building residential. We don't tell a property owner what they can and cannot do other than the general zoning that we have already adopted in our general plan. It is interesting though, in the downtown office buildings, we are seeing more mixed use, although not a lot of housing. We are seeing several of the commercial projects that have been built downtown are including, and some of the new ones are including at least some housing in them. So that is a trend that we did not see in the past.
Great, thank you. The next one is, can you share the source of data about jobs and homes? The Moving to San Mateo County Florida report states that 19-to-1 jobs homes ratio between 2010 and 2016. Did the rate of development really pick up in the second half of the decade? My question, my addition onto that is, I'm assuming we're comparing county versus city data. Is that correct? Or is this something that we need to come back to? Sandy?
I would need to go and look at that.
We'll
I'm
come
sorry,
back to
off
the
the
answer
fly.
to
I
that
think that question came in during Brandy's part of it. So it,
And I shared it in the chat. It's from California employment data and census data, and it's on the Home for All website, and it is county specific.
Great.
So I did share that link already.
okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. How will the housing element consider cities' relative housing and jobs creation construction? Many of the people who take high-paying jobs live in communities that have very low RENA numbers. How can we get to the point where every city is doing its fair share?
Can you?
I
Well,
can
I mean, yep, you could. Yeah, I mean, because you're reading it, I'm not seeing.
Yeah,
it.
I can answer that one. Every
Okay, thanks,
city
Diane.
is required to report on its ability to accommodate the units that they have been given. And the enforcement of that comes from the state, not from other jurisdictions around it. So that would be something that would come from the state to ensure that local jurisdictions are in fact doing their fair share. Can we get copies of all slides in this meeting? I'm assuming yes.
Yep.
We will have them posted. How is the affordability level of ADUs calculated if not deed restricted? David, you want to talk about the study that's being conducted?
Sure. So we've partnered with folks at UC Berkeley and actually done a statewide study of ADU rents to determine the affordability levels. We just have the data, we just got it, and we'll be looking at that to determine, based on the data from the survey, what the rent structures are in ADUs in each region, including in San Mateo County. We'll be reviewing that with HCD, and that will determine how we can count and project ADUs by affordability level over the coming 8-year planning period.
Great, thank you. The 15% affordable housing for developers, are they at this rent level for life? Sandy, you want to answer that question?
Yes, well, the life of the building. So our BMR rentals are restricted for the life of the building. That's part of our agreement. We do execute agreement with the developer, and we do monitor them.
Great. Can you outline the consequences of not meeting the RENA goals? What if every city in the county fails to meet these goals? Dave, you want to answer that question?
Sure. So if we don't meet the goals of RENA 5, there's some requirements that kick in. Well, there's the RENA 5 and then there's the getting certification of the RENA 6. I don't know. So there's the RENA 5, there's requirements to kick in if you don't meet those numbers. And then RENA 6, if we don't get a certified element that shows that we can accommodate the numbers that are projected, there's other consequences that kick in then. So if we don't have a certified element, the state actually, you become susceptible to legal challenge, and the ultimate lot of steps could be that you lose your land use authority, and the courts then require that you do an update to meet the numbers under a court order. But there's a lot of steps that happen between that. So there would be multiple rounds with HCD to make sure that we meet the numbers.
Great, thank you. The next question is, might the city find that the current study areas may not reasonably prepare us to meet RENA 6 and 7? That's RENA cycle 6 and 7. If so, what happens next in the process? I can answer that right now. We don't actually know yet what will happen with the whether we can meet it within the study areas. That's what we're working on right now. And at such time as we find out one way or the other whether we can meet it and for the 6th cycle, and if there would be some capacity for the 7th cycle, then we can discuss further how to look at that. But that would come through the general plan process, because this housing element will only deal with the RENA cycle 6 for the city's housing element. Let's see, who ultimately decides the housing element's final numbers, and when will that be determined? Dave, you want to answer that one?
I assume by the final numbers, that means the RENA numbers. So that will be the process is the draft numbers get released this summer. There's an appeal period. The appeals are responded to. We expect to have final numbers either end of the year or the first part of next year. So those will be the numbers that we need to respond to. And it's important to understand that we need to plan for a site inventory, a number of sites to accommodate that housing level, not just the exact number. There has to be a buffer. So there needs to be about a 15 to, it's not a hard written number, but a 15 to 20% buffer to accommodate that level of projected need.
Great. Let's see. Is there a chance there may be more incentives to build ADUs by not having property tax increases at the same high rate as a normal home addition? I defer that one to someone else. Know something about property taxes.
Well, I get. Are you going to, David?
Well, I mean, the county is the assesses property value. I'm not sure how much role the city has in determining that.
I'm pretty sure that would take legislative action, so that's certainly something that could be taken up with the legislators.
Let's see. I'm trying to leave most of the RENA questions for sort of the high level RENA questions for the RENA workshop, which is, so maybe I may not getting, let's see, that's a comment, not a question. Do we have any more questions that have maybe not so much to do with specifically with the RENA allocation process? Because we're going to get to that on that special workshop. Here's one. Is there a way to overturn the 50-foot height limit in order to allow taller housing close to San Mateo's 3 Caltrain stations and in the downtown? That might be a question for Julia if she is able to, if we can hear her. We cannot hear her.
That's okay. I can answer that. And so the height limits were implemented by a voter initiative. And so in order to change the height limits, it would need to go through the same process, but there are some situations where the height can be exceeded when there's community benefits and other things that come into play and other state laws. So there are some situations where it can be higher, but in order to change that overall, we'd have to go back to the people. I don't know, Julia, if you got audio, if you have anything to add to that.
Here's a question. What is San Mateo's approach to moderate income? Are scarce affordable housing funds best used to subsidize middle income people? How can we zone for middle housing types in the housing element?
Yeah, I think this concept of middle income housing is something that a lot of the jurisdictions within 21 Elements have an interest on, and I know we'll all be kind of working together with 21 Elements about, what does that look like? What kind of policies can do that? And I think the policy question on using the city's funding, how to prioritize, since our funding is scarce, how we prioritize that funding is always a policy decision that the council wrestles with when we come up with housing opportunities. So those are all part of the conversation going forward. Absolutely.
Okay. Are you only offering the RENA workshop once? What if people can't make that date? Other workshops have been offered twice. Well, it will be recorded, so it will be available to people who may not be able to attend that particular deep dive into the RENA allocation process. Let's see. Can HCD overrule the height limits to have a compliant housing element? I can answer that one. What the HCD will ask us to do is discuss the height limit as a constraint to whether or not it's a constraint to the development of housing, specifically housing that needs to achieve a certain level of density. So a discussion will be included in the housing element. And if it is determined that it is a constraint, then the city would have to provide documentation on how to get around that issue or how to deal with that constraint. Why does the city not build affordable housing themselves, independent from developer interests?
So the city, owning and operating and managing housing is not really a core service of the city. There are a number of nonprofit developers and even some for-profit developers that have a lot of experience in constructing and managing affordable housing. The city's role is usually to support it financially, in some case, and also to look at our own policies to approve housing so that we can facilitate getting that housing built. But for the city to own and operate housing is not really a core service of the city.
Okay, let's see. I'm seeing mostly comments. Does anybody else have questions? All of this will be recorded, by the way. We'll take note of it and include it in our summary of comments and questions. And with respect to the question about a second RENA deep dive, the comment was, but they can't ask questions if they're watching a recording. Any question that the city, that participants are interested in making should be sent to the city. And the city has a number of ways in which the community can stay engaged and ask questions of the city that will be answered. Can you say more about what prevents more affordable housing from being built? Sandy mentioned financial constraints. You want to answer that?
Well, sure. I mean, in our current housing element, we have demonstrated in our plan that we have sufficient land to accommodate more affordable housing. We have sites that could be developed. However, as you all are aware, land is extremely expensive in the Bay Area. Construction costs are at an all-time high, and rents are, and the difference between market rents and affordable rents are high. So the missing link in all of that is financing to cover those gaps. So that's why my opinion is that, you know, money is the biggest challenge to getting that housing built.
Sandy, do you know off the cuff how much it costs to build a unit?
I think the project that we're working on downtown right now is around $700,000 a unit for an apartment.
And I know that
certainly ranges above and below that
Right.
countywide.
And I know that the Turner Center came out with a report that said statewide, and this includes low-cost areas of the state, is close to $500,000 on average to construct a single unit. So it's expensive everywhere. Let's see. If the city has 50-50 renters and owners, how do we make sure that renter concerns are equally covered in city policy?
Well, you know, first of all, it's required to do that as part of the element. So we plan on looking at that. We also want to be able to make sure that when we do our community outreach, that we hear from renters as well as homeowners.
Great. For those of you that have asked more than one question, I may not have called out your additional questions because I want to make sure that everybody who's not had an opportunity to speak has had an opportunity to share their questions. So, however, if I haven't gotten to your questions, they will be responded to in writing and will be shared when we compile all the comments from these meetings. Would the city consider building housing near 92/280 if we cannot accommodate the RHNA numbers in the alternative plans? I'm assuming that means the alternatives of the general plan.
Christina, you want to?
Yeah, I would just go back to our earlier conversation that the city's not actively going out there and building housing at this point in time. There are situations like the downtown sites that Sandy mentioned where there can be partnerships, but those are policy decisions that are made above and beyond the staff level. And so what types of projects may or may not be possible in the future, that's not something that we know today. So
but I will just add, through the general plan process, those sites would be looked at.
they will be looked at to see,
evaluated whether what would be the best use or the most logical use.
what they're suited for. So they would have a land use designation based on what is determined to be based on community input and studies and technical evaluations, what's the best use for the site.
Next question, what incentives exist for developers to build BMR housing?
So for the city's BMR program, where we require developers to include 15% affordable housing, that's a requirement that the city has. And then it makes the builders eligible for state density bonus. So this is a state law that allows developers, when they provide affordable housing within their market rate project, to get a little more density than what the base zoning is designated for. It also allows them some concessions on some of the zoning requirements in order to make that work. And what that does is it provides some extra market rate units to the developer to basically pay for those affordable units. And that's a program that that many developers take advantage of in San Mateo.
Okay, next question. Has the city identified any surplus land act properties? And do surplus land act properties need to get past any thresholds before being put in the housing element?
So I can speak to that. You know, when we did our last housing element, we looked really carefully at city-owned properties for potential housing sites. And as I mentioned, we've actually developed housing, or in the process of developing housing on 3 parcels that the city owned. And so there's not much left. You know, we have a lot of parks that we're not going to put housing on. There's not much left that the city owns that could be used for housing. However, There are two very small parking lots downtown where in January, the city did indeed determine that they were surplus, and some proposals, some letters of interest have come in on those properties, and the city council will be looking at that soon. Now I can't remember the question. Did I fully answer that? So we don't really see any moving forward at this time.
Okay, I think we're going to go. Thank you for everyone for your comments and questions, both. They're both being recorded. And I think we're going to go to the next section, which is this is what we've heard, and I'm going to turn it over to Sandy.
Well, we just wanted to give you a chance a little bit to participate in this workshop today. And 2 years ago, we had a couple of community conversations on housing, 2019, and that started the dialogue. People were able to talk to each other one-on-one. Of course, it was before COVID, so we could actually sit around the table and talk to each other. Depending on how things go in the next few months, we really hope to have some in-person workshops in the future, maybe later in the year, so that we can continue that kind of dialogue. And anyway, some of the key things that we heard in those meetings were comments about how housing costs are affecting the quality of life, lots of comments on traffic and parking impacts of new development, concerns about affordable housing options at all income levels and all stages of life, concern that people are moving out of the area, and also concerns about how new development impacts the character of San Mateo. So so Diana, now the next slide, we had some conversation questions that we wanted to jump into then. So based on that, our first question to you is, have things changed? Are there other things we need to consider? And we're basically asking if you want to put comments in chat, we can start to collect those thoughts you may have. So if people want to put that in to chat. Diana, can you see, are we getting comments in there?
Yes, just a few. I know okay. If you are interested in actually making a live comment, you can go to the reactions function and raise your hand if you have that option underneath. If you'd like to actually speak, we can unmute you and you can share a comment. We like these kinds of chat comments because it's easier for us to record them, but of course you're certainly welcome to speak on anything that you'd like to. So some of the comments.
I think why don't we go through all three questions, so since we have sort of limited time here, but so if you have thoughts on how things have changed and are there other things to consider, also making sure that we hear from our entire community during this process. We're always looking for new ideas on how to do that. And then the last one is, it's 2030 and we've accomplished a lot. What does success look for San Mateo? So what would be our vision of what we'd like to see after our housing element is completed in the future? And then if you would like to share out loud, if you want to raise your hand, we can take some of those comments just to share with the group. And if you don't want to share, that's okay. We will be like Diana said, we will be capturing this and summarizing it. We'll post. We'll be posting the recording, the slides, and the Q&A on our website.
Yeah,
For this
and
meeting and for the meeting that we had Tuesday, and then there will be another one also to reschedule.
And just a reminder that if we didn't get to your question in this conversation, we will definitely get to your question in writing as part of our summary of comments and questions.
Okay, we have a hand raised, Lisa. See you.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I think this is a great session. I think one of the challenging questions for how things have changed and what we should consider is how is life going to change once we come out of the pandemic? Obviously, work patterns have changed, personal attitudes may have changed, all sorts of things. And you won't know that. There's not a decade-long report to give you that information before you have to do the general plan. So I think that's something that we all have to be very sensitive to. Another area might be, what's going to happen to commercial real estate, and will there be a glut? And could that be included in our affordable housing calculations?
Great, thank you. Carol, Gillette?
I seem to be.
Oh dear. Carol, we're having trouble hearing you. I am anyway. Yeah.
Carol,
I can't respond to your survey. Could you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I cannot get into chat. My chat seems to be frozen at the bottom. And on this have things changed, there is no way to respond to you. Is this a survey? Are we supposed to write remarks, or what do you need from this?
We're just interested in your comments. This is just a way.
How do we make the comments?
Well, if you can't chat, if you want to just tell us verbally, that would be fine right now.
Well, I'm thinking that there's some opportunities that are being missed. Under Prop Y, the City Council and the Planning Commission have the authority to authorize taller ones. Do you know why we haven't? Like Trags is a completely wasted site. It could have been taller. And the areas down by Kentucky Fried and those areas are wonderful opportunities to do higher levels. Maybe we've already done that. I just don't know.
I'll answer that just slightly. For the extra height, it is actually designated in certain areas. It's mapped out on in our zoning maps. And so off the top of my head, I'm not a planner. I don't know if those two projects that you mentioned are in the area where you can get the extra height in exchange for community benefit. Brandy, is it time to go back to move forward to the wrap up?
We still have some time.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes. So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
May I ask a question?
Who is that, Carol? No, who's speaking?
Ellen Wang.
Oh,
Thank you. I missed getting this at some other meeting. I was wondering, with the ADUs, do they count for the RENA numbers? Am I saying that right? Do
yeah.
they?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. All right. Diana, do you want to just read a couple of the comments since we have a couple minutes?
Sure. Some things to consider. quality of life is very important to most residents. If we don't have that, what are we left with? It's a very tough call and a very, very complicated issue. Other things to consider: providing alternative transportation options, making buses, walking, bicycling, Caltrain more convenient and safer so that housing doesn't need parking and car-based transportation. Success looks like overcrowding is no longer a problem. Young adults can find a place of their own, and children can live near families when they grow up, all without more displacement. Success in 2030, traffic is not congested. All people who work in San Mateo can afford to live here. 2030 goal, all neighborhoods are nice places to live, including neighborhoods near transit-oriented areas and near major shopping. We also need to keep the climate crisis in mind when making plans for the future. Quality of life is terrible for people who are forced to overcrowd or commute long hours due to the lack of housing supply. Success in 2030 is no more overcrowding or long commutes for people who want to live and work in San Mateo. We need more parkland too. Absolutely. Success looks like abundant, diversified housing options. I'm just going randomly through these to make sure I hit some points here. Have things changed from, this is about what if things change. More focus on equity and other economic access, e.g. housing near public transit, equitable stratification of financial support, etc. Go back. I'm going in no particular order. Things may have changed, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Our lives are constantly changing. I think San Mateo is still a great place to live. We do need to make sure we increase the walkability of the city. Traffic inside San Mateo has gotten substantially worse in the last few years. Road changes and additional buildings seem to be the main contributors. Adding more building without planning for increased traffic will negatively impact quality of life for all residents. With regard to work patterns, it's not clear that anything has changed permanently. Let's see. I agree that considering the climate crisis should be a top priority within the housing element. Where we build housing will have a big impact on carbon emissions in San Mateo and our long-term livability. Unfortunately, I think we really need to limit jobs and / office space because this directly affects the affordability of housing. That's kind of a quick run through. Obviously, we all questions that or comments will be collected. So if I've managed to skip over yours or several of yours, then definitely look for those comments in our report out. Safe, secure homes for all the people who need them, safe walking and biking.
Could we reiterate how people can view the questions and answer period in the chat comments after the meeting? Someone asked about that.
Say that again. I'm sorry, Brandy.
What will be like a time, like when will the stuff be online? How can people look at the chat and all of the comments and questions that have been submitted from this meeting?
Great. Dave, do you want to answer that?
Well, for the city stuff, we'll be working on that. Depending on how many questions we get, it may take us a few days, but we do hope to get most of this information up next week.
Well,
and what we can do is, oh, sorry, I was going to say we can also follow up email everyone when that's all available.
Right. I think our hope was to do one report covering the 3 meetings because the 3 meetings are covering the same content and there may be some questions that get asked more than once and we can just bunch those and respond to them. And so as a reader, you don't have to go through 3 different reports trying to find all the different questions. So we'll do our best to organize those, but it may mean that that's going to take more than a week to get the report done because there's a 3rd meeting that we're still going to be scheduling.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Yeah.
We will try to get the slideshow and the recordings though up
Yeah, the slideshow we can
more quickly.
That's that we can put up easy.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Why don't we?
So there's just to be clear, there's a link to on the screen right now, the link for the City of San Mateo's housing element update page, and that's the most important one for you all to have. And then we also shared the Let's Talk Housing link, which is the county-wide conversation that's happening. And that's also a good place to get additional information and resources. But those two, well, and we have links between those two pages on both those sites.
And Linda, if you could share the link to the feedback, that would be great. So if you have additional comments you want to submit in writing, tell us what you thought of the meeting, what we could do better. You could go to the tiny URL, LTH San Mateo, and Linda just put that in the chat. Again, we're going to have that All About RENA meeting on April 22nd. Thank you for your questions, because you are going to help us put that presentation together and make sure we really respond to all of your questions and concerns. You can register for that event, learn more about housing, and connect to a bunch of other resources that will be on the Let's Talk Housing website over the next several months. And Linda, if you could share that link as well, letstalkhousing.org, in the chat.
And then I would also just reiterate that when you visit our city page, there's a contact staff too. So I know we heard some more interest in, going deeper on RENA, maybe even deeper than our deep dive, or for some folks who might not be able to attend. I just want to make sure everyone knows that you also have a direct line into staff, and we're happy to talk to you too.
Wonderful. I don't know if there's anything else city staff want to do, but we appreciate everybody attending and all of your questions and comments.
Yes, especially for giving up your Saturday.
Right.
That really shows that you are interested and committed to the community, and we appreciate that. So I think with that.
Oh, sorry, one last thing.
One last thing. Okay.
That the housing element page on the slide didn't work, so I'm going to post the correct link that should work. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, apologize for that.
Yeah, that one works. The other one, yeah, good.
Yeah, and then I just want to mention one thing. I'm following along in the chat, and it looks like Councilmember Bonilla had a comment attributed to him that he didn't make. And so I just want to make sure that I call attention to that for anyone who's not following the chat, and just to make sure that folks are looking at the entire record when they do look at the summary, and we'll correct that error before anything gets published.
Oh, I thought of something that we forgot. We didn't display the polling results. It was on the screen for a while, but we could only see the first question. Is that
We share them right now.
Or maybe scroll down.
Can you see that now? Okay.
I can only see the first question. I can't see the other four.
I'll just scroll
There's
through.
a scroll down bar at the right.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you scroll down yourself, or do I need to scroll down?
Oh, let me see.
You can.
Oh, I can, of course.
Okay.
Okay. What was your connection to San Mateo? Most of the people on today's webinar live here. Most of the people in today's workshop own. Most of the people in the workshop have lived here for more than 20 years. Most people in the 50 to 69 age demographic, and and most of the people in today's workshop are white. So it's just a smattering of who is here today, and like what we said earlier, is we're also looking for ideas to reach out to other groups that weren't represented today. It's all important to us. But again, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you all have a good weekend. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.